The wind howled through the tattered sails of the storm reefer, carrying the scent of salt and the promise of danger. Captain Rowan Drake stood at the helm, his coat billowing like the storm clouds overhead. He was a man carved from the sea itself, dark hair swept by the wind, a sharp jawline kissed by years of sun and battle. His emerald green eyes gleamed like polished jade, filled with the hunger of a man who had never learned to fear the deep. Tonight, the sea whispered secrets, and Rowan listened. Ahead, the Isle of Sirens loomed, shrouded in mist, a jagged silhouette against the moonlit waves. It was said to be cursed, a graveyard for men who dared seek the treasures hidden in its heart. But Rowan had never been one to flinch at ghost stories. "Lower anchor," he commanded. His first mate, Vance Black-Tide Halloway, shot him a wary glance. "Captain, we should wait for dawn. They say the island sings at night." Rowan chuckled, unbuckling the leather straps of his scabbard. "Then let it sing." He stepped into the rowboat, his boots creaking against the wet wood. "Keep the ship ready. If I don't return, you know where to drink in my memory." Black-Tide hesitated, then muttered a curse and nodded. "Aye, Captain." Rowan and a handful of men rowed toward the shore, their lanterns casting eerie glows on the black waves. As they neared the island, the mist thickened, swallowing the stars. And then, the singing began. It was not a song of words, but of longing. A voice, sweet as honey yet laced with sorrow, curled around Rowan's senses, slipping beneath his skin. It was a melody older than the tides, calling to something deep inside him. The other men stiffened, gripping their weapons. "Steady," Rowan murmured, though even his own heartbeat had quickened. The rowboat scraped against the shore. The sand was soft, too soft, like powdered pearl, untouched by time. Ruins jutted from the jungle beyond, covered in twisting vines. In the center of it all lay the treasure they sought, a pedestal of carved stone, upon which rested a single glistening pearl. Rowan approached, slow and steady, his fingers twitching at his sword's hilt. The pearl was no ordinary jewel. It pulsed faintly, as though something inside it was alive. It was colder than it should have been, even beneath his gloved fingers. "The sea's heart," one of his men whispered in awe. "Fortune and ruin," Black-Tide had said. "No man takes it, and lives unchanged." Rowan smirked. "Superstitions." He wrapped the pearl in cloth and tucked it into his belt. And then the sea screamed. A monstrous wave, taller than any ship, rose from the depths, swallowing the shoreline in a deafening crash. Rowan's men shouted, scrambling for the boat, but the ocean had turned against them. The current dragged them under, the salt burning their lungs. Rowan barely had time to gasp before the world turned black. Cold. Deeper than cold. He sank. The water pressed against him, heavy, relentless. Darkness wrapped around his limbs, pulling him down. His lungs burned, his mind reeled. Through the murk, something moved. A figure, gliding through the abyss with unnatural grace. Silver hair trailed like moonlight, and eyes, impossibly blue, like the heart of the sea itself, locked onto his. A mermaid. No, not just a mermaid. Her fingers brushed his face, cool and gentle. A shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from something else. Something deeper. He should have been afraid. But as the darkness claimed him, all he could think was that her voice, her song, was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Rowan drifted between darkness and light, his mind a storm of half-formed thoughts. He was drowning, wasn't he? He remembered the crushing weight of the ocean, the silence of the deep, and then something else. A voice, soft as the tide, fingers like a whisper against his skin. He gasped awake. The scent of salt and damp earth filled his lungs. His body ached, his throat burned. He was no longer in the sea, but somewhere warm, wrapped in thick furs. The glow of a lantern flickered against the canvas of a tent, its golden light barely keeping the shadows at bay. Rowan groaned and tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his ribs, forcing him back down. A soft movement caught his eye, and he turned his head. She was there. Sitting near the entrance of the tent, half hidden in shadow, was the creature who had saved him. A mermaid, but not like the painted tales of tavern songs. Her silver hair, damp and wild, spilled over her shoulders, catching the firelight like strands of moonlit silk. Her eyes, deep as the ocean itself, studied him with quiet intensity. She had wrapped herself in one of his coats, though her bare feet peeked from beneath the fabric, delicate and pale as seashells. Rowan stared, his mind struggling to form words. "You?" His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. "You saved me." The mermaid tilted her head, as if tasting the sound of his voice. Then she spoke, her tone like a melody caught in the wind. "You are awake." Her accent was strange, smooth and fluid, as though each word was shaped by the tide. Rowan swallowed hard. Who are you?" She hesitated, watching him carefully. "Silara." Silara, a name that felt like waves against the shore, ancient and untamed. Rowan tried again to sit up, this time with more care. His body still ached, but his strength was returning. "Where are we?" "The island where your ship fell," Silara said softly. "I pulled you from the sea before the tide could take you." Rowan exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. He should be dead. By all accounts, he should have sunk into the abyss, another lost soul claimed by the ocean. But she, this strange, ethereal being, had saved him. "Why?" he asked, meeting her gaze. Silara looked away, the glow of the lantern reflecting in her sea-blue eyes. "You were sinking. I could not let you drown." There was something more beneath her words, something unspoken. Rowan felt it, like the distant echo of a forgotten song. A gust of wind shook the tent, and Silara flinched, pulling the coat tighter around her. That was when Rowan noticed. She was trembling. "You're cold," he realized. Silara did not answer, but the slight shiver in her shoulders betrayed her. Rowan frowned. "Mermaids don't get cold, do they?" Silara's fingers tightened on the fabric of the coat. "Not in the water." Understanding dawned. She was not meant to be here, on land, in the world of men. The sea was her home, her lifeblood. Without it, she was vulnerable. Without thinking, Rowan reached for the blanket beside him and held it out. "Here." Silara hesitated, her gaze flickering from him to the offered warmth. Finally, she shifted closer, hesitantly taking the edge of the blanket. Her fingers brushed his, cool and soft, sending a strange shiver through him. Rowan watched as she curled beneath the blanket, her silver hair falling over her shoulders. The sight stirred something in him, something unfamiliar and dangerous. A mermaid in a pirate's tent, a creature of the deep tangled in the world of men. And yet, for the first time in his life, Rowan Drake felt as if he were the one drowning. Rowan woke to the distant crash of waves and the scent of damp earth. The lantern had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the tent walls. His muscles ached, but the pain in his ribs had dulled. His head was clearer now. And then he felt it. A strange, unfamiliar sensation deep in his chest. A pull like an invisible thread tying him to something unseen. His breath caught, and his gaze shifted to the figure beside him. Silara. She was still wrapped in his coat, curled beneath the blanket, her silver hair cascading over her shoulder. But something was different. Her breathing was uneven, her brows slightly furrowed, as if she were feeling the same strange force that now gripped him. Then her eyes opened. For a moment, she simply stared at him, the glow of the lantern reflecting in her ocean-blue gaze. Then she sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. "You feel it too," she whispered. Rowan swallowed. "What is this?" Silara hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "The tie bond." Rowan's heart pounded. "Tie bond." She nodded, fingers tightening around the edges of his coat. "It is a merfolk vow. It happens when one of my kind saves a life in the depths of the sea. A bond is formed, our fates intertwined. She exhaled shakily. Your pain is mine now, and mine is yours. Rowan frowned, the weight of her words settling over him like a storm cloud. So what? You're saying we're connected? Silara's gaze dropped to the floor. Not just connected. If one of us suffers, the other feels it. If one of us dies, she hesitated, the other may not survive. Rowan's pulse quickened. This was madness. A pirate cursed to the sea was one thing, but to be bound to a mermaid, to share his life with hers. He ran a hand through his dark hair, letting out a rough breath. You should have let me drown, he muttered. Silara flinched, and regret twisted in Rowan's gut. He hadn't meant it, not like that. But before he could speak, she lifted her chin, her expression guarded. I tried to let you go, she admitted softly. But I couldn't. The words hummed between them, heavy and uncertain. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the tent. The island was silent, save for the distant murmur of the sea. Rowan sat up fully now, watching her carefully. How do we break it? Silara shook her head. The tide bond is ancient. Few remember its secrets. Some say it can only be undone by returning to the place it was formed. Others say. She hesitated. What? Rowan pressed. Silara's fingers brushed the pendant around her neck. A shell, smooth and iridescent. Some say the only way to break it is for one of us to die. Silence filled the space between them. Rowan exhaled sharply, his mind spinning. A pirate's life was never meant to be tied to anyone. He had fought, bled, and stolen to carve his own path. But now, with the weight of the bond settling deep in his bones, he realized his fate was no longer his alone. Silara shifted, pulling the coat tighter around her slender frame. I will leave at dawn, she murmured. I do not belong here. Rowan studied her. The way her silver hair caught the lantern's glow. The way her voice carried the rhythm of the tide. She had saved him, not knowing it would cost her freedom. And now, despite the weight of the bond, despite the curse that had tethered them together, Rowan wasn't sure he wanted her to go. Not yet. Outside, the sea roared, as if echoing the storm rising in his chest. The first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, casting long shadows over the wreckage-strewn shore. Rowan stood near the water's edge, arms crossed, watching as the tide lapped at the sand. The night's revelation still weighed heavily on his mind. Silara stood a few feet away, her bare feet sinking into the cool sand. The wind tugged at her silver hair, lifting it like threads of moonlight. Even wrapped in his coat, she looked like she belonged to another world, a world of deep currents and whispered songs, far from the harsh realities of men. I have to go, she said softly. Rowan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He knew it was coming. He had told himself all night that letting her leave was the right thing to do. That he was a pirate, bound to the sea, and she was a creature of legend, never meant to linger in the world of men. And yet, he felt it, the invisible pull of the tide bond, the way his pulse seemed to match the rhythm of hers, the way he knew, deep in his bones, that if she walked into the sea now, something inside him would never be whole again. Silara turned toward the water, taking the single step forward. But the moment her foot touched the tide, a sharp gasp left her lips. Rowan moved before he could think. He caught her by the arm, steadying her. What's wrong? She shivered, her fingers pressing against her chest. It's the bond, she whispered. Something has changed. Rowan frowned. He could feel it too, a strange tightness in his chest, like an unseen force holding them both in place. Silara swallowed hard, her sea-blue eyes dark with worry. The bond is not letting me leave. A cold realization settled over Rowan. If she was right, then their connection was stronger than either of them had guessed. She wasn't just tied to his life, she was tied to him. Silara met his gaze. I think I have to stay with you. The The words sent a shiver through him, though not from fear. Rowan looked at the horizon, where the storm reaver still lay in ruin. His crew was out there, somewhere, searching for him. The life he had built, of piracy, of danger, of storms and gold, was waiting. But now, there was something else. Someone else. He took a slow breath, the salty wind filling his lungs. Then stay. Silara blinked. What? Rowan's grip on her arm softened, his fingers brushing against her wrist. If you're bound to me, then we figure this out together. He glanced at the wreckage of his ship. I need to find my crew. If they survived, they'll be searching for me. I'll need help. Silara hesitated. You would take me with you. A mermaid among pirates. Rowan smirked, though there was something gentler in it now. I've sailed with worse company. Silara studied him, searching his face for deceit. She must have found none, because after a moment she nodded. Then I will go with you, she said. A pirate and a mermaid, bound by fate. The sea stretched before them, restless and waiting. And so, with the rising sun as their witness, their journey together began. The jungle at the heart of the island was thick with mist, the air damp and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked leaves. Rowan moved with careful steps, his cutlass drawn, his sharp eyes scanning the undergrowth. Silara followed close behind, her bare feet silent against the mossy ground. It had been hours since they left the shore, searching for any sign of his crew. The island was unfamiliar, wild. The wreckage of the storm reaver had been scattered along the coast, but Rowan knew his men. If they had survived, they would have regrouped somewhere inland, away from the dangers of the sea. He exhaled, rubbing at the dull ache in his ribs. The tide bond was still there, humming in his veins like a second heartbeat. Every time he glanced at Silara, he felt it, a tether, unseen but unbreakable, tying his fate to hers. A rustling sound in the trees made them both freeze. Rowan lifted his cutlass, his muscles tensed. Silara's fingers tightened around the edge of his coat, her ocean blue eyes wide. Then a voice. Captain. Rowan turned sharply, his pulse quickening. From the dense foliage, a figure emerged, soaked, battered, but unmistakably familiar. Carrick, Rowan breathed. His first mate stood before him, his dark hair damp and matted with salt. A deep gash ran across his forehead, but his green eyes were sharp as ever. Relief flickered across his face before he glanced at Silara, his expression shifting to wary confusion. We thought you were dead, Carrick said, stepping forward. Rowan let out a rough chuckle. Not yet. More figures emerged from the jungle, men from the storm reaver, bruised and weary but alive. Their numbers were fewer than before, but it was more than Rowan had dared to hope. Carrick's gaze flicked to Silara again. And who's this? Rowan hesitated for only a moment before answering. Silara. She saved me. The men exchanged glances, but none spoke. Silara, to her credit, stood tall, meeting their stares with quiet confidence. We need to find a way off this island, Rowan continued, his voice steady. Do we have any ships? Carrick sighed, running a hand through his tangled hair. A few miles north. There's a wreck. Not ours, but it's in better shape than anything we left on the shore. If we work fast, we might be able to make it seaworthy. Rowan nodded. Then we move now. As the crew began gathering supplies, Carrick pulled Rowan aside, lowering his voice. Captain, you're bound to her, aren't you? Rowan stiffened. What do you know about it? Carrick exhaled, glancing at Silara. Enough to know it's dangerous. The tide bond isn't a blessing, Rowan. It's a curse. Rowan's jaw clenched. She saved my life. I won't abandon her. Carrick studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll protect her. But be careful, Captain. The sea is cruel to those who love what they shouldn't. Rowan didn't answer. He turned, catching sight of Silara standing at the edge of the clearing, her silver hair catching the light of the setting sun. The sea had brought them together. Fate had bound them. But as the shadows lengthened around them, Rowan couldn't shake the feeling that the true storm was still ahead. The wind howled across the battered deck of the wrecked ship, carrying the scent of salt and rain. The sky had darkened, clouds rolling in from the east, warning of a storm. Rowan stood at the bow, arms crossed, watching as his men worked desperately to patch the torn sails and secure the mast. They had found the ship stranded on the northern shore, half buried in the sand, its hull cracked but repairable. It wasn't the Storm Reaver, but it would do, if they could fix it in time. Solara stood near the edge of the deck, her silver hair whipping around her face as she gazed out toward the sea. Rowan could feel the weight in her expression, the silent pull of something he didn't yet understand. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured, stepping beside her. Solara's lips parted slightly before she nodded. "The ocean is restless. Something is coming." Rowan studied her, more than just the storm. She hesitated, then turned to face him fully. "The bond ties us together, Rowan, but it also ties me to the sea. My kind will sense that I am missing. If they come for me." She trailed off, her voice carrying a quiet warning. Rowan clenched his jaw. He had spent his life battling storms, facing enemies with blades and fire. But this, he didn't know how to fight the pull of the sea itself. Before he could respond, Carrick called from the mast. "Captain, we've got company." Rowan snapped his head toward the horizon. Dark shapes moved across the water. Not ships. Something else. Solara inhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the railing. "They found me." The waves churned violently, as if the sea itself was awakening. Figures rose from the water, sleek, inhuman forms with gleaming eyes and razor-sharp fins cutting through the foam. Merfolk warriors. Rowan's hand went to his cutlass. "So much for an easy escape," he muttered. One of the warriors let out a haunting cry, and the wind answered, whipping through the sails with unnatural force. The crew scrambled, gripping ropes and bracing themselves against the sudden shift in the tide. Solara stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Rowan, listen to me. They will not let me go. They will take me back, no matter the cost." Rowan's grip tightened on his weapon. "Not while I still breathe." Solara's eyes softened, but there was sorrow in them. "That's what I'm afraid of." The first warrior lunged from the sea, landing on the deck with a crash. His silver-scaled body gleamed, webbed hands gripping a jagged spear. His eyes locked onto Solara. "Come home, sister," he commanded, his voice carrying the depth of the abyss. Solara took a shaky step back, but Rowan was already moving. Steel clashed against the spear as Rowan blocked the warrior's path. "She's not going anywhere," he growled. More figures emerged from the waves, climbing onto the ship. The crew unsheathed their weapons, a battle igniting beneath the roaring sky. Solara turned to face the first warrior, her expression torn between fear and defiance. "I am not yours to command, Kalos." Kalos' gaze darkened. "You were never meant to belong to a pirate, Solara." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating Rowan's determined face. He could feel it, the tide shifting, the weight of destiny pressing down upon them. The battle had begun, and neither the sea nor fate would let them escape without a price. The deck shook beneath Rowan's feet as the sea warriors stormed the ship. Rain poured from the sky, turning the wooden planks slick and treacherous. Thunder rumbled, a deep growl in the heavens, as the battle erupted into chaos. Rowan ducked beneath a spear thrust, his cutlass flashing in the dim light as he countered with a swift strike. The merfolk warrior snarled, deflecting the blade with inhuman speed before lunging again. Rowan barely had time to twist away. Around him, his crew fought with all their strength, clashing steel against the ocean's deadly children. But the merfolk were fast, too fast. They moved like water itself, slipping between blades, their attacks precise and merciless. Solara stood at the center of it all, her silver hair drenched, her sea-blue eyes locked onto Kalos. He hadn't attacked her, not yet. He only watched, his trident gleaming with the glow of distant lightning. "You must come back," Kalos said, his voice calm even as the battle raged around them. "This is not your place, Solara." Solara's fingers trembled at her sides. "It is now." Kalos' gaze darkened. "He has changed you." Solara shook her head. "No, I chose this." Rowan fought his way toward her, cutting through another warrior with a fierce swing. His breath came heavy, his muscles burning. "Solara, we need to move." Kalos stepped between them. His sharp, webbed fingers tightened around his trident. "You cannot have her, pirate." Rowan's grip on his cutlass tightened. "I don't take what isn't given." He glanced at Solara. "And she's made her choice." Solara took a step toward Rowan, and Kalos let out a quiet sigh. One of regret, perhaps, or sorrow. Then, faster than Rowan could react, Kalos struck. His trident slashed through the air, aimed at Rowan's heart. Solara moved before she could think. She threw herself between them. The sharp edge of the trident sliced into her shoulder instead of Rowan's chest. A cry of pain tore from her lips, and Rowan caught her before she could fall. Blood stained the rain-slicked deck. Kalos' expression flickered with shock. "Solara." Rowan lowered her gently, his own heart thundering in his ears. "Stay with me," he whispered. Solara winced, her fingers tightening around his coat. I won't let them take me," she whispered. "Not from you." Kalos hesitated, his grip on his weapon loosening. Around them, the other merfolk warriors faltered, sensing the shift. Rowan's rage burned like fire. He turned his glare to Kalos. "This ends now." Kalos looked between them, his sister bleeding in the arms of a pirate, and the crew still standing, unwilling to surrender. Then, at last, he lowered his trident. The storm began to settle. The merfolk warriors retreated, slipping back into the waves one by one. Kalos stepped to the edge of the ship, casting one last look at Solara. "You will always be one of us," he said. "The sea never forgets." And with that, he dove into the depths, disappearing beneath the restless water. Rowan exhaled, holding Solara close. "You're going to be all right," he murmured. She gave him a weak smile. "You can't promise that." But Rowan did, and as the dawn broke through the storm, he swore he would never let her go. The first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft gold and crimson. The sea, once violent and raging, had calmed to a steady rhythm, its waves lapping gently against the ship's hull. The storm had passed, and with it, the battle was over. Rowan sat on the deck, cradling Solara in his arms. Her silver hair clung to her damp skin, her breath slow but steady. The wound on her shoulder had stopped bleeding, but her face was pale, her strength drained. "You're still with me," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. A faint smile touched her lips. "The sea didn't take me. Not yet." His grip on her tightened. "It never will. Not while I'm here." Solara's ocean-blue eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You can't fight the sea forever, Rowan." He looked away, his jaw clenching. He had fought against men, storms, and fate itself. But the ocean was different. It was vast, unyielding. It was her home. And no matter how much she loved him, a part of her would always belong to it. Carrick approached, his expression grave yet relieved. "We've done all we can to patch the ship, Captain. We'll be able to sail by midday." He hesitated, glancing at Solara. "And what of her?" Rowan's chest ached at the question. He had asked himself the same thing, over and over, since the battle ended. Solara, as if sensing his thoughts, reached up, her fingers resting lightly against his. "Rowan." He met her gaze. "I cannot stay," she whispered. The words struck harder than any blade. Rowan swallowed, his throat tight. "You don't have to go back to them." Kalos left. He let you go. Solara shook her head. "The bond between us is real. What we have is real." She pressed his hand against her heart. "But I was born of the sea. It is in my blood, in my soul. If I stay too long away from it, I will wither. I will fade. Rowan's fingers curled around hers. He had known, perhaps deep down. He had always known, but knowing didn't make it easier. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the waves. Finally, Rowan exhaled, his voice hoarse. I can't lose you, Silara. She smiled, a sad, beautiful smile. You never will. The sun climbed higher, its golden light spilling across the water. The tide had begun to shift, calling her home. Silara sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her shoulder, but Rowan helped her. She looked at him one last time, her fingers trailing against his cheek. Will you wait for me? She asked softly. Rowan's throat burned, but he managed a smirk. The sea never forgets, he said, echoing Kalo's words. And neither will I. A tear slipped down Silara's cheek, but she nodded. With one last lingering touch, she turned toward the railing. The ocean stretched before her, endless and welcoming. She climbed onto the edge, her silver hair shimmering in the sunlight. Then, with a final glance back, she leaped into the water. The moment she touched the sea, the waves embraced her like an old friend. Her form shimmered, her tail returning in a flash of silver and sapphire. She swam a few feet away, then surfaced, her radiant eyes locking onto Rowan's one last time. Then, with a flick of her tail, she was gone. Rowan stood at the railing long after she had disappeared beneath the waves. The wind tousled his dark hair, the salty air filling his lungs. Carrick stepped beside him. What now, Captain? Rowan took a deep breath, his gaze still on the horizon. We sail, he said. And one day, when the tide is right, I'll find her again. And as the storm reaver's new sails filled with the wind, Rowan knew one truth above all else. Some loves are carried by the tides, and some are meant to return.